All right, welcome everyone to National Distance Learning Week 2022. 15 years ago, we were embarking on this journey of celebrating distance learning in the United States. And here we are again, 15 years later, coming back together to celebrate distance learning. And it seemed fit that this year we focus on the topic of leadership. So welcome to our 15th anniversary edition National Distance Learning Week, focused on leadership. Before we get started, I would like to just send a quick shout out to our sponsors. And I will begin with, let's see here. I will begin by thanking our gold sponsors, D2L, Instructor, JDL Horizons, Logitech, NC Poly, Tennessee State University, TDU, and Verizon, as well as our silver sponsor, EDU Alliance, Harmonize, IntelliBoard, IAP, Information Age Publishing, Nearpod, Yamaha, Yellow Dog. Our bronze sponsors, Anatomage, Arizona Telemedicine Program, and the Southwest Telehealth Resource Center, Enrollment Resources, Virtual Advisor, Proctorio, Video 360, Viopta, Virtual Care, Xanadu. And then our friends, thank you all for your contributions. Thank you for making National Distance Learning Week possible. So now I would like to take a few moments to introduce our keynote speaker. This year, we have the distinct honor and privilege of having Dr. Karen Ferguson open up the conference for us. Dr. Ferguson has a vision to transform access and success in higher education. She has worked in nearly every model of higher education and firmly believes that education remains the key to socioeconomic mobility and multi-generational success. Dr. Ferguson is a collaborative leader and learning professional who acknowledges strategic results, improves individual and institutional performance, and increases organizational effectiveness. She has experienced leading small, large, and cross-functional groups on multiple projects, including faculty and student performance, persistence, retention, curriculum and assessment, enrollment and program growth, and the student experience. As a non-traditional student herself, Karen is dedicated to improving the academic success of adult, military, and other modern learners. To that, Karen believes that we must all focus on our ability to influence our organizations, legislators, and regulators. So on that note, I would like to ask you all to welcome our keynote speaker, Dr. Ferguson. Dr. Ferguson, you have the floor.
Thank you, Gio, and I hope I can live up to all of that. Give me just a second. And okay, do you guys see slides? We do. Okay, great. Thank you so much. Technology is amazing when it works, and hopefully today's one of those days. And I want to thank you guys. I am Dr. Karen Ferguson, and I'm just so happy to be here with you today. I appreciate the time and attention that you dedicated to being part of these very important conversations. It can be hard to carve out time for this type of work, and I'm glad you did. I also want to thank the leaders at National Distance Learning Week and USDLA for the invitation to speak with you today. I also want to do some disclaimers out there. For the sake of conversation, you're going to hear some gross overgeneralizations from me. It's so that we can start to think. We have people from industry, K-12, telehealth, government, higher ed, and probably other spaces in the room today. I thank you for coming. A lot of the samples and examples that I'm going to share today are based in the context of post-secondary education. If the shoe doesn't fit, don't wear it. But I'll ask you to check your closet and see if you have any shoes that might look a little similar, and maybe just try to apply something from a different area into your area, and just really think about the context of what we're talking about today. I also know that I'm not probably going to talk about anything that you guys don't already know. I hope to just get us thinking. My goal today is to irritate you a little. It's actually kind of get you uncomfortable, maybe get on your nerves just a little bit, so that we stop talking so much and we start doing. I don't know about you guys, but in the height of the pandemic, there were so many webinars and so many things, and we were talking about so many things. And then we kept talking. And it's just, I really want us to start doing and start working and doing things that are impactful. It can be something big, it can be something small, just something. Let's take action in our field and not be that passive participant, as my kids would call it. What is it? A non-something player in the video games, the people that just walk around and fill the space in the video games. So on that note, I kind of want to share something that bothers me a little bit. I think we have a really big problem in higher education and in education overall. And I'm not talking about student loan debt, retention, the changing demands of society, declining student numbers. I'm talking something about something much bigger than that. And it's our collective inability and sometimes refusal to change. It's our decision not to turn in the direction of the Titanic of the education ecosystem that we work in. You know, I was talking with some faculty and staff at a fairly small school, the kind that's facing a lot of the closures that are going on right now. I was talking to them about 2 years ago, and I asked them, what do you think will happen if you don't change? And from very smart, very well-educated people, the answer was, well, we'll just keep plugging along like the little school we are. And if you guys are here with me today, you know that that's just simply not the case. We can't keep sitting here like this garden gnome, season after season, change after change, winter after winter, and stay the same. And some of you might already be frustrated with me. You might be rolling your eyes and sighing and thinking, but we did change. You know, the traditional schools, they took on face-to-face classes and put them in Zoom. We started talking about online classes and the benefits, high flex. We renamed hybrid high flex. We talked about the flipped classroom. We called our students on the phone. We stayed strong through Zoom burnout and learned how to provide academic advising at a distance. We used simulations. We did the things that distance learning professionals have been doing for decades. We did all of those things. And think about all the things that we did during COVID. All of the things that we did differently during COVID. And we did, and I don't want to take that away from anyone. Short of when our faculty ancestors stopped sneaking off to study and hiding books in their robes, or maybe the changes following the implementation of the GI Bill, these last few years have been probably some of our most innovative, definitely some of our most cross-university collaborative, and some of our most student-centered years. We changed, but we changed when we were forced to change, right? We adapted to what we thought was a temporary situation, and we came together as a collective. Brick and mortar schools are reaching out to distance schools, connecting with their online learning counterparts, trying to learn best practices. I saw Google groups, shared resources, published lists of OERs that we were sharing with each other to help faculty teach and students to learn at a distance. We acted, we implemented, we iterated, we worked together, we didn't sleep. We listened to our students, we reacted to their needs, and we figured it out. Right, but we were forced to, we didn't have a choice. So let's talk about some of the things that we've been talking about for a very long time. The enrollment cliff. And I'm just going to list out a few, and if I don't think I get to see what you guys are typing in, but feel free to share it. I'm not going to hit everything that's going on in our field. I'm going to throw some big things out there that we've been talking about for a long time. So we have this impending enrollment cliff. There's a big cliff and a little cliff. There's two cliffs. They're coming. We have 48 million student loan borrowers who owe more than 1.6 trillion in federal student loans and another 1.7 in private loans. 1.7 trillion. We have more than 39 million people with some college and no credential. There is a demand both from workforce and legislature for universities to recognize work-based learning and prior learning and probably apprenticeships. There's a very large perception that higher education just isn't worth the ROI. There's a changing needs of our students, and not just because they're digital natives, but because we're seeing a greater bifurcation between those who are prepared and have the resources to be successful in post-secondary education and those who are not. While we're expected to provide employers with applicants who are plug and play with all the knowledge and all the skills to hit the job running. There are more than 580 schools that closed between 2017 and 2021, and there are more expected this year. We have rising tuition costs, increased costs of technology, the cost to operate a university, like salary, we like our paychecks, we like our health benefits, we're paying for computer labs, simulation labs, and the costs associated with the student experience. And we're facing those changing demands in a post-secondary education in an increasingly regulated environment, right? With different expectations of what work means for both faculty and staff. Is anybody else dealing with faculty members who learned that they don't have to teach on ground? We've asked our students to come back, but we still have a few faculty members that don't want to come back. We have to figure those things out. And probably one of the biggest things that I think we're going to be dealing with over the next couple of years that maybe we haven't really started talking about yet is the unknown impact of COVID-19 on the social and intellectual abilities of our current and future students, right? We're talking about what it means to take in the high school grads. What is it going to mean 5 years from now, 10 years from now, when we're taking in the students that were impacted from this when they were first learning language skills? Or when they were first experiencing education. We don't yet know what that's going to look like or if there is going to be an impact. And if you're in my world, there's also an enrollment cliff coming, and it's something that we've been talking about for a very long time. But my question is, have we systematically or fundamentally digitized our students' learning experience? Have we fundamentally reduced the cost of a degree? Have we improved retention and completion rates? Have we figured out PLA, work-based learning, or apprenticeships? Or have we responded to the negative narrative when we know that post-secondary education does result in reduced unemployment rates, higher wages, and better health outcomes? So my question is why? Why do we talk so much and do so little when it comes to change? It's frustrating. Like, I'm frustrated. I joined higher education to make a difference, right? I joined higher ed to change the lives of others in the way that mine was changed through education and to have a positive impact. I joined higher ed to teach, to learn, to grow, to lead, to make things better. And I think everybody here did too. And I think if we were together, I'd see heads nodding yes. Maybe some people shifting their weight, checking their watches, or listening to a better podcast on their phones. But for the sake of this conversation, I think everybody would go with a resounding yes. That's why we're in the field that we're in. We decided to work in education to make a positive impact, not to talk about it, but to do it. So then why haven't we fixed more? It's something that I wrestle with a lot. Why aren't we doing more? And we're busy, right? We are. Everyone here is working their tails off right now. We're busy, but we haven't fixed more. And when I wrestle with that, I decided, let most of the people in the room off the hook right now. We haven't done more because we weren't trained to do. When you think about the people that are leading universities, that are leading education institutions, the superintendents of high schools, however you want to look at it, the vast majority of us, not all of us, and that's probably a good thing, but the vast majority of us have a PhD or an EDD. We were trained to read, we were trained to research, and we were trained to discuss. Very few of us were trained to do. So let's just take a minute and talk through the dissertation process. Not all of us, but most people in the business and the social sciences use a format that goes something like identify a problem, and it better be grounded in other people's research. Conduct a literature review, which is 100% grounded in other people's research. Design your 3 questions and your very tight methodology. Conduct your research and discuss your findings and your implications. So when you think about a dissertation, like I held mine, I don't think anybody else has ever read it, but I did hold it once. And the biggest part, the heaviest part where I spent the most time, the part that hurt the most was chapter 2, when I was summarizing what other people have researched, right? Where did I spend the least amount of time? What has like maybe a page, probably more, but maybe a page is the part at the end of chapter 5 where we talk about implications, or we talk about what's next. In my dissertation, there's not a single page that talks about what I actually did, right? I did that after my research, but that's not what we do. That's not what we're trained to do. We're taught, and we often still teach our students, that we don't know enough about anything to have our own opinion. We have to cite, and cite some more, right? Original thought can only come after a thorough and deep understanding of what others have learned. And I bet right now, if we were to audit a sampling of graduate level papers in Canvas, Blackboard, Moodle, whatever LMS everybody's using, I bet at least 2/3 of each paper is dedicated to summarizing the work of others. It's what we were taught, and it's what we teach. In education, we like things to be tested, to be proven, to be researched. And I'm not going to say that's a bad thing, right? We don't want to cause harm to our students. But then we like them to be reapplied, retested, reevaluated, and reanalyzed before we come to a conclusion that any of that could be a potential action, right? And we're trained to poke holes in everybody else's research and find those flaws so that we don't accidentally contribute something to something else, right? We're trained to tear that apart. We're trained to go to conferences and read everything critically. And again, not a bad thing. It comes in handy. But it takes a lot before we actually start to implement anything. So I went to a very large high school in El Paso, Texas. And those of you that know Texas know that the only sport that Texas plays is football. So the coaches design playbooks, right, based off of players' strengths and abilities, based off of the teams they're going to play. And at the time, back in the day, right, those plays were sketched out on paper and probably organized in a trapper keeper or 3-ring binder. I'm showing my age. And that was the playbook, right? The players had to study them. They had to know their exact roles, the spots they had to hit, the runs they had to make, the tackles they had to hit, right? The playbook was specific to the team and it was kept protected. It was proprietary to a certain extent. And if we think about it, the playbook is a coach's version of the application of his or her research findings, right? It's what they actually do with their chapter 5. It's the knowledge that they've gained by assessing their players and how they apply that. So it makes sense. And somewhere along the way, business kind of adopted the idea and kind of coined the term, the business playbook, the sales playbook. It made its way into higher education, the online playbook. We've seen a lot of organizations kind of take on this idea. And in a nutshell, playbook is very much the same thing, right? It's an outline of exactly how your business or your university does what it does. It includes each role, responsibility, business strategy, and differentiator. And if you write one correctly, nobody has to guess how to do their jobs. We know exactly what's expected of us and how to get it done. So a playbook is the result of a deep understanding of the internal and external business context. Differentiators, policies, procedures, it's the who, what, when, where, why, and how of a business. So if we think about it, it's chapter 5 plus of a dissertation. And in higher ed, we might want to base our plans on a model. We might call it a theory, a paradigm, a doctrine, a schema, right? Big words for playbook. But it's really the foundation of our decision making. But it's just not going to work anymore. And I can't honestly say whether or not it's been working for us at all for quite some time, but it definitely won't work anymore. Because all of these approaches are based on research. They're based on that thorough and deep understanding of all of the variables. The ability to identify the dependent variable and the independent variable, moderate for some, control for others, and come up with the right answer. But we can't do that right now because we've never been where we are before. This space hasn't been researched. There's no chapter 2 to write. There is no chapter 2 for us to write. The variables are changing faster and faster and faster. And our institutions are too different, too complex, and too living for one model, one approach, one paradigm, or one playbook. So what we were trained to do, that dissertation, the other side of it is dissertations are very much a me project, right? It's my research questions. I have to do all of the work, right? And there's good reasons for that. We would hate to plagiarize something like that, but it's a me project, not a we project. And when we're serving our institutions, when we're serving our students, our faculty, our staff, our employees, it has to be a we project. And lastly, this old approach, it's based on something that we just don't have today, and that's stability. So what do we do about that? I say we embrace the Renaissance. This is an exciting time. There's no chapter 2 to write. Right now, we don't want to wait for higher ed to crash and burn before we start creating, right? This picture for me is very inspirational. I grew up in El Paso. I went hiking after forest fires. This is not my photo. And I can remember going on those hikes after the fires in the Franklin Mountains and seeing beauty grow out of the scorched earth. Now, I don't want our earth to become scorched, but I am saying that we are at this precipitous in higher education where we have to change, where we can't just sit back and wait. We cannot be that known. So we aren't going back to the way things used to be. The world is forever changed. We're going to continue to have new problems. We're going to have new problems faster than we've ever had new problems. We're going to have new student challenges. We're going to have supply chain issues. Did we think 3 years ago that we weren't going to be able to get books? I'm working with an institution right now that struggles to get books because the books are printed in China, right? We're going to have issues that we didn't even think about having in higher education that are going to impact students, their resources, and our ability to serve them. And we're going to have to maintain this ultimate mental flexibility in order to stay relevant. So we're going to have to figure out how to operate and iterate while the ground is kind of moving beneath us. So let's just take a few minutes and kind of iterate on an old model. What if the research model became the action model, right? The first and last step are still the same. You're going to identify your problem, right? And your problem it needs to be based in your institution. When we think about the things that students are faced with right now, you're not going to have a problem identifying a problem. We're going to be able to do that with ease. The challenge will be finding the right problem to solve that has the right impact at your institution. But then go from identifying the problem to finding your village, right? The people that want to make change. Find those people on your campuses and your organizations, and then get to work, right? Conduct a quick scan and see what others in related situations have done. Nothing that any one institution does right now can be picked up and applied to another institution. We're too different. But you can learn what other people have done and try to mash up those things, right? It's a version of the chapter 2. And then design a solution and an implementation plan that fits your organization, right? Instead of researching what everybody else has done, research inside. Figure out what are the cultural implications, what are your capabilities, where are the biggest pay points. Really understand the context of the problems that you want to solve, where you want to solve them, so that you can modify whatever somebody else is doing to meet your unique organizational and cultural and resource needs. And then find your go, no-go milestones, right? They're kind of the guardrails. These are the things where you say, okay, we should be here by this date, and this is our performance criteria. And if we're not there, what are we going to do? Right? It might mean it's a no-go. You don't get to go past go, right? You're stuck. You're not going to take the project forward. It might mean that you learn and iterate and keep moving things forward. It might mean that you stop. And all of those options need to be okay. It's just important to know when and if you need to cut and run. Then you implement. So you get to work. Along the way, you don't wait till you're done. Along the way, you're continuously assessing and deciding what you're doing. You're revisiting your go, no-go situation and making sure that you can keep moving forward. And then, of course, you're going to discuss your findings and your implications. And the big thing that if anybody takes away from today, and I know you've heard it before, but you're going to mess up. That part needs to be okay. Right? Discuss your findings and implications. Go back to chapter 5 if you must, and really think through what went well, what didn't go well, what can I do differently next time, and document those things. And also document the learning that occurred outside of maybe what you were trying to do. And I'll share a little bit more about that in just a second. Because what I'd like to do is share my good, my bad, and my ugly. We all like perfect implementations, right? And most of us don't like to admit that we mess up. So I'm going to share a few examples with you. 3. One is a really small thing that we worked on that was very successful, and it actually fixed a much bigger problem than we probably thought it would have. Another one was one of my top 5 failures in my career. And then another one is something that is kind of successful, and it could fail or succeed at any moment in time, depending on what we do with it. So all 3 of these are kind of couched in engagement. And I use this because I have a feeling everybody's struggling with engagement right now. It's the crux of what we do, and it's how we retain and support our students, our faculty, our staff. It's getting harder and harder every day because we're competing for time and attention. Everybody is feeling the influx of everything right now, and it's just that much harder to get people engaged. So a small thing, but it was an action that had a big impact was in the last couple of years, I transitioned from a couple of very large schools in my history to a very small school. And mostly online institutions to a residential campus. The faculty and staff were committed to students. They care deeply about them. The care for students was palpable on campus. But when it came to each other, there was just this silo. 25 meters in between 2 buildings felt like a 250-mile chasm. There was disengagement. People weren't talking to each other. And there was a lot of, I don't know if you guys can see me, a lot of this, right? Not it. It happened over there. I didn't know. A lot of the not it game. We needed to get some things done pretty quickly, and I didn't have the time or the money for a comprehensive approach or a big change management approach. But we had to start thinking differently. So we had to do it in action. We were seeing enrollment and retention starting to decline. The culture is continuing to shift. So we read a book, right? It's a small thing. We read a book, but we talked about ourselves within the context of the book. And I figured I would get some pushback because we read Extreme Ownership, which is about Navy SEALs. And sometimes the challenge of how do you apply what Navy SEALs do to what we do in education? I wasn't sure if I was always going to be able to make that connection with people. But we read that book and we agreed to meet every couple of weeks to talk about what we learned. The first week was a little awkward. I had to do a lot of pulling, right? A lot of how does this possibly apply? What's going on? I worked really hard to pull out the correlations between the SEALs and the university culture. The second week was a complete sea change though. There's a section on friendly fire that really hit home to everybody. We were able to see how friendly fire impacts us in our organizations. And somebody actually walked in before we even started the meeting and started the meeting with, we do this, we shoot each other and we're fighting the same war. People started apologizing to each other when they realized they've been firing at a friendly. By week 3, I didn't have to lead the meeting anymore. They were giving each other examples, communication was improving. There was just some shared language there where everybody got on board and understood that we're all fighting the same fight, and that's the fight for student success, right? Is the culture perfect? No. And reading the book didn't fix everything, but that little action brought those teams together and increased communication. And now they're very self-directed. So a book with small reading assignments, a small action, right? It's a little thing that we did, but it had a very big impact on how we work together. So my next example is a big thing. Same problem, engagement. We were starting to lose students during the application process. Again, it's that competing priority. How do I get their attention? How do we work with our students to move them through the process? Sometimes engaging a prospective student is even more difficult than an existing student. So we assessed our processes and realized that it was flat. It wasn't engaging. We did a market scan and settled on a new CRM. And it was a CRM that was supposed to come with a lot of automated nudges for applicants and staff. If a student didn't do something with a certain amount of time, they moved from one bucket to another bucket. That sent a message off to a staff member too, to re-engage the student, right? Sounds really cool. It was going to integrate with the SIS. Our staff loved it. They were completely involved in the process. We used a lot of the same management techniques that we've used for successful implementations. But pretty quickly, we missed milestone 1. There was still promise, so we collectively decided to move on. Implementation got a little bit better, but there were still significant issues. We missed milestone 2, and we were on track to miss milestone 3, right? We met as a team. The same people that helped choose it were the same people that were going to use it, and they were on the implementation team. We all talked about all of the hope, all of the time, all of the energy, and all of the money that we had into this project. It was supposed to have a huge impact, right? But it didn't work. It became a distraction from our goal. And it was having a negative impact on our counselors' ability to do their jobs to serve students. So we cut it, right? We cut it quick. We cut it before it did more damage. And we learned from it. We documented what worked and what didn't. We created new knowledge for evaluating tools in the future. And I didn't like having the conversation with my boss that we were cut something that we had resources tied up in. But at the same time, that shared decision making and that growth in the team that happened from trying to implement something that didn't work and learning from that experience has set that team up for success. They now know that they can push through, they can learn, and they can make those hard decisions, because it's harder to say, this didn't work, I own the failure, and let's move on, then sometimes it is to keep pushing, right? And you keep pushing for months and months and months, and it still doesn't work, and everyone's exhausted, and everyone's disengaged and frustrated. So it's a hard decision to make, but if you can make that decision at the right point in time, you actually benefit your team and you benefit your organization. So one more example, and then we'll move on. Something that might work and might not, right? Engagement. This time we're talking about student engagement. Followed documented steps on an implementation plan and decided to implement a two-way texting tool that features some automation. Right? We were having a real problem, not just during COVID, but especially during COVID, of engaging our online learners and helping them show up to class on time and be engaged in their assignments and reach out for help. So we decided we have to do something, right? The risk of not doing something is way worse than an imperfect solution. So we decided to implement a two-way texting tool that had automation. You could use it or you didn't have to use it. And we didn't know which way to go, right? So we just split the team in half and we split the students in half. Half of them used the automation, half of them didn't. But the problem was big enough that we just decided we didn't have to have the right answer. Even a placebo effect was going to be better than nothing. So we met our milestones, we assessed our implementation, we measured the results, and both approaches work. And at the highest level, we saw an immediate lift in student engagement through the tool and in classes. We saw a decrease in attendance issues and increased communication with both student success team and with faculty. We dug into the data. We saw that they work differently for different populations. So overall, everybody had a lift. Some groups, the automation worked better. Some groups, the individual approach worked out better. So the success team, who took immediate ownership of the tool, created data-informed decisions and outreach strategy based off of their findings. And it kept working until it didn't. Our students changed again. The engagement tool was starting to trend down. Attendance issues were starting to go back up. So the team went back to the data, began talking with the students, and went back to iterating. The contact strategy that worked in the first 6 months didn't work in the second 6 months, right? So we have to keep changing. Our students kept changing. So this tool has the potential to work if the team stays flexible, if we stay on top of the data, if we don't decide that we're done, right? We have to keep going back and reworking it. We can't become the gnome in the garden. We can't just let it go and think we're done. So my point is that small things can make a big difference. You guys know all this stuff. Not everything works. We need to be okay with it with it when it doesn't, and find the learning that occurred, find the team building that occurred, and be able to build off of that. Help our teams understand that we don't expect perfection, but we do expect progress. And when things work, that's great. Let's celebrate, but let's also be prepared for them not to work in very short order. We have to move with our students. We have to move with our stakeholders. And for lasting change to happen, that whole like fix, unfreeze, fix model of the 80s just isn't going to work anymore. I don't know that you're going to be able to fix a change for very long. It's going to have to be very fluid for us to continue to meet needs. So we talked a little bit about the what. Let's talk a little bit about the how. And just for context, one of my biggest frustrations during some of the COVID webinars was we talked a lot about what was wrong. We didn't talk about how to fix it, right? So how do we actually get beyond just knowing that we need to do things differently? I think we all know that. The first thing, we talked about this a little bit earlier, but build your village. Find a coalition of people that support change. If you can find them where you work, that's great. It's even better if you find them where you work and you can all agree on the same problem. If not, find somebody who can support you, somebody that can be your safety net. Not if, but when the resistors knock you off your tightrope and things don't go perfectly. It's going to happen. Prepare for it. Surround yourself with people that want to make things better, even if they're not working on the same projects that you are. Create a new approach. And yes, test it, research it, write about it, do all of the things that we're very much used to doing in education. But don't wait for somebody else to do something for you to make a positive impact. Don't wait for somebody else to try out that solution. It may or may not work for them. That doesn't mean it won't or will work for you. We have to stop waiting. Involve others, but fight bureaucracy, right? When we think about shared governance, and I might make some people mad here, shared governance takes a really long time sometimes, right? And by the time we get something through our process, I've seen 3-year curriculum improvement processes. Right? We can't do that anymore. By the time you get something approved through the process, it's already changed again. So involve others. Definitely listen to your students and your faculty. They're smart. They know what needs to be done. They're passionate. Get everybody impacted, involved in the solution. But don't be afraid of moving forward without 100% consensus, right? Get input and ideas, but take the lead and move forward. When I was in the Army, one of the things that was beat into me was that a bad decision is better than no decision, right? If you make a bad decision, you can change. If you don't make a decision, you're stuck, right? And stagnant universities close. So make a decision, move, assess, iterate, and just keep moving. Speak up. This one's nerve-wracking, right? I think we need some space to acknowledge that. It is nerve-wracking to speak up right now. And I get it. Nobody wants to be canceled. But if we want things to get better for us and for our students, we have to re-engage in open, respectful dialogue and discourse. You know, but I read the article that the Chronicle published back, I think it was July 26th. And it was an entire article on why college presidents don't speak out. But if we can't model productive dialogue, if we can't model critical thinking and collective problem solving for our students, we can't be surprised when they show up to class and model Twitter with a full-on unfounded attack during a class discussion. If that's what's being modeled, that's what people will do. And if we don't model what we expect, the type of conversation, the type of dialogue, the type of critical thinking, then we can't expect our students to do the same. So if you're in a position to engage at the national level, you owe it to yourself and you owe it to your institution and your industry to do so. If you're not, what can you do is the question. Can you share what you know to be true about higher ed wherever you are? Can you write an op-ed? Can you go to a high school and explain that you don't have to borrow all of that money if you don't want to? There are other options. Can you go to a Chamber of Commerce meeting? You know, where can you find the little opportunities to change the narrative about higher ed? So I was on a trip this summer with some of my extended family. We all love our family, and I do. And I loved it when they all started talking about how expensive college, none of them work in higher ed. And they all started talking about how expensive college is and how much debt people are taking on for degrees that probably don't matter. So I was sitting there listening to the armchair quarterbacks, and I had to decide, do I want to enjoy my vacation and get up and go to the hammock and not listen to this conversation and maintain my relationships? Or do I owe it to my industry to at least help the people closest to me understand that it's not that simple? So I pissed a few people off. I might not have a cousin anymore. I'm not sure, just kidding. And I changed a few minds, right? So I explained to them and just tried to help them understand that the cost of education, there's a whole lot of things driving it, right? There's state support, there's not state support, there's grants, there's this, there's that. And also there's the pools. There's the washing machines that text students when their laundry is done, so they don't have to sit in a laundry room and wait anymore. There's the water filling stations at like every corner of a lot of campuses, right? There are a lot of amenities at our institutions that weren't available to students in the 70s, 80s, 90s, and early 2000s, right? And that's a lot of what students are paying for. They're paying for that experience that they demand from us, not the actual education. So I also talked to them about student loan debt, try to help them understand, right? Like, we can do our best, and we do. Every institution, I can honestly say this, that I have ever worked at has done their best to help students understand the difference between how much money you need for your education versus how much money the government is willing to provide you. And you aren't required to take that bigger amount. But at the end of the day, if a student decides to take that bigger amount, that's between them and their loan servicer. The institution can't tell them not to. right? And I try to help them understand that students can go through an educational experience and it can be a quality education, but at the end of the day, they're people. Things happen to people and people make mistakes, and I can't guarantee employment for someone. I just can't. There's no way that can ever, sometimes people go to school just to learn and they don't have the same expectation that someone else in society has put on that expectation of education. So we had open dialogue. Some parts of it were good. Some parts of it were uncomfortable. We agreed to disagree. And that conversation didn't change the world, but it did change the perspective of a few people and get a few people thinking about things a little bit differently. So my ask is that you speak up. You choose your venue, you do those things. That's 100% on you, but just don't let this keep going. And then lastly, and I promise I'm getting close to the end, solve problems where they lie. Oops. And so now I'm going to rely on the earlier thing of speaking up and that it's nerve-wracking and we don't want to be canceled. So I want to use kind of a controversial example here. So oftentimes we saw, at least at institutions, we solve problems at the highest level possible, right? We solve them at the top. And so an example of this is like, how many of our institutions have increased the focus on opportunity, access, diversity, equity, or inclusion? And I think if we were all together, everybody would be nodding yes, and everybody would be agreeing that that's an important thing for us to do. And I'm not minimizing that at all. Second question, how many of our organizations created a new role? A senior leader or executive leader, someone high enough for everyone to see to lead the diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts of the school. Most of us did. And we need this, right? We need the intentionality, we need the strategy, we need the focus. How many of our schools hired more boots on the ground? How many of us hired the people that do the nitty-gritty work of advising underserved students, of hiring the people that help students understand student loan repayment, help students understand differences with transportation, how they can get their daycare challenges fixed, how to deal with food scarcity, mental health, interviewing techniques, and all of the other barriers that prevent more diverse students from successfully navigating our very complex world of higher education and joining us in our mission to educate others. Did we hire professional development staff to create intentional career progression and professional coaching for our diverse set of employees? I don't know, maybe we did. Did we do that, or did we hire one leader to sit at the top and expect that visibility to improve access and success for students and employees? I'm not saying that we did or didn't, and I firmly believe that there are a lot of us out there doing this right. But my question is, as we think about problems, challenges, and opportunities in higher education, are we fixing it at the symptom level, or are we fixing it at the root cause? And lastly, redefine leadership, right? Leaders come in all shapes, sizes, colors, generations, and genders, and from all levels of our organizations. Leadership doesn't have to come from an official leadership role. You can lead from any position within your organization, your family, or your social structures. Leading can be lonely, very lonely sometimes. So trust yourself and find your village, right? Leaders do things that other people don't do. We take risks, we push boundaries, we hold others and ourselves accountable. We push, we pull, we follow. We think, we strategize, we listen, we contingency plan, we iterate, we do everything we can to stay above reproach, and sometimes we fail. And it can be lonely and it can be exhausting. So when you're taking those risks, learning those lessons and seeking refuge, then seek refuge with other leaders. You need to know your breaking points and stop before you get there. Rely on that village. They'll tell you. Take a deep breath and then get back to work. And most importantly, can we please talk less and do more? Please, let's do more and do the things that matter. Don't confuse doing more and having an impact with being busy. Please don't wait for permission to do something. If you need permission, you have it. I'll give it to you. I think your students already gave it to you when they trusted you with their education. They really do. I think your faculty gave it to you when they decided to come work at the institution. And I think institutional leaders gave it to you when they decided to hire you. So this week's events are designed to honor the 15th anniversary of National Distance Learning Week. And a lot of the sessions, I was looking at all of the descriptions, there's a true leadership focus in a lot of the presentations this week. So my ask of each of you is that you attend, you listen with intent, you question, and you look for that one little nugget of information that you can apply. It might look completely different than the nugget that you originally picked up in the conference by the time you apply it, but let's really work together, share ideas, take action, and support each other this week, and really work together to continue leading the field of distance learning.
Great session, Karen.
Thank you.
We had a lot of comments. I started pushing them through the live feed. But let me see if I can get a specific. Actually, some of your audience answered some of the questions as they were going along. There was one in there that was a question basically on the acronyms, SCNC, PLA, WBL, ROI.
Oh yeah, and I just didn't want to put a whole lot of words on those slides. So
It's all good.
SCNC, some college, no credential. PLA, prior learning assessment. WBL, work-based learning. And then return on investment.
Absolutely. And I didn't think I saw any other questions on here. But you know, I did see many comments on Find Your Village. A lot of people liked that, right? Kind of build your supporters around you. All right.
Yeah, so important.
Absolutely. You know, my background's more on the engineering side and you know, startups specifically. So when I hear you talking, it was resonating with me. You know, bureaucracy and startups they don't go along.
No, they don't.
No, you had to be a self-starter. You had to really think outside the box. There was a principle we used to use as engineers that I employed with my team, which was rapid prototyping, which fit in with your workflow, you know, and instead of taking forever to get to, you know, the final product, rapid prototype something, get it to where it's down and dirty quick within a week or two, demonstrate the feasibility of it. And if it looks good and it holds water, quote unquote, to the metrics that you develop, then you go and sit back and say, okay, now how do we build this from, you know, the complete product? And it helps you get to market a lot quicker. So,
it does. And I think when we think about, you know, finding the village, I think we also need to acknowledge that's hard. Right? It's hard to find that group of people.
It is.
And it's hard, I think, for people that are willing to be out in front. And I guess I'll speak more just personally. If you're willing to be the one that's out there, you learn how to be out there and take some hits. So balancing that forward push with the ability to say, I need help.
That's right.
And I need my people around me. Even if they're not part of this project, I need people that understand me, that get me, that know what I'm working towards, that can tell me that it's going to be okay. And all of those other things, that's a hard balancing act.
It is.
Because, and I think just acknowledging that is important, that just being willing to lead and also being willing to be vulnerable.
That's right.
Can feel like competing forces. They're necessary forces. They go together very well, but sometimes it can be a very competing sense of self when you're looking for that village, and to be vulnerable enough to say, hey, you want to be in my village?
Yeah,
sometimes that
right.
can be risky too.
Yeah, getting out of your comfort zone was one of the things I saw you mention, and it's tough to do for some people. You know, introverts, it's a lot harder for them to get outside. An extrovert you might see get out a little bit quicker, but there's that balance. You don't want to be outside of it, you know, all too much. You want that group involvement, right? You want that team camaraderie. You don't want to seem it to be a one-man band, if you will. Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, let's see if we have any other folks. We're still on. Let's see if we have any other questions. Will slides be available later? Absolutely. as well as this was recorded. So we will put this back up as part of the EduVision platform so folks can go and view it on demand when things are done. A lot of positive comments. Gabriel, love this, take action. Love that. Arletha, your realistic observation of shared governance was very realistic. And I know Arletha very well, and I agree with that 100%. Folks, do we have any other questions for Karen? We'll give it a second here and see if we get any more. Gio, any thoughts from your end?
Oh, Gio, you're muted.
You're muted.
It wouldn't be a Zoom session if we didn't say that at least once.
Where is
There
the
we
jar for me to put the dollar?
See, now you do this, I just put it up here and I say, I can hear you. My little calling card here.
Okay, no mistakes, only lessons. And
There we go.
That's awesome.
see with the background. But yeah, Karen, thank you so much. That was such a great message. And, it takes for us to be brave and to have the courage to get out there and innovate and kind of understand, like you were saying, that we're encountering unique problems, and to unique problems we need to find unique solutions, and we need to feel comfortable to explore and to be okay with making mistakes along the way. That was such a lovely message. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.
To our audience, before you leave, kindly take a moment to let us know how you felt about this session. I'll put the link in chat once more. It just takes a moment. It's an anonymous survey, just collecting general feedback to help us improve programming and to collect any thoughts that this keynote may have provoked, and to see where you would like for us to go with programming next time.
And Gio, I'm not sure if they see our live chat. I don't know if that carries forward to the stream. Do you know if it does?
Put it on the stream.
I'll just take a look here. I've got both sides, the Zoom side, and then I have the live webcast side. I want to make sure that gets out there.
Not to worry, I'm actually going to share my screen, and I have a QR code. We can also get to our slides from that QR code. So let's go to play from current slide. Here we go. So if you have a mobile device and would like to point it to that QR code, it will take you to our survey. And again, we're very grateful for your feedback. You're helping us provide to you, to continue to provide to you wonderful programming. On that note, I would like to thank our sponsors one more time. We appreciate you for supporting the efforts of the United States Distance Learning Association, and we appreciate you for making this conference possible. We hope that you will join us in 1 hour at 3 o'clock Eastern for Dr. Pina's talk about avoiding common errors in leading online programs. Dr. Pina has been researching and serving as a leader in our field for a very long time. So he has very valuable lessons to share with us. I invite you all to stay tuned at 3 o'clock and to learn from Dr. Pina. So once again, Dr. Ferguson, thank you so very much for taking the time to
Thank you for having me.
Provide this keynote and to kind of set the tone for us in our exploration of leadership in distance learning.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Wishing everyone a lovely day and see you back at 3 o'clock instead.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.